So could you respond to the reports by Mike Tipping of the Bangor Daily News that the Republican Party has been sending flyers in support of you to liberal voters?
I don't get those flyers. I'm not even sure. I guess I've seen one. I think Kara had one. I didn't ask them to do it. I doubt they're doing it for my benefit. If it's the flyer that Kara has, I looked at it. It seemed to me to be accurate and truthful, which is more than I can say about some bloggers.
I think that kind of the basis of his argument was that it's going to liberal voters as opposed to Republican voters.
Chris, I have no idea who it's going to. I've only seen it on the desk of one of my staff people, who I think it was sent to her because she must be classified as a liberal voter. I don't know what I could say about it. I mean, I wouldn't spend my money that way.
Right.
I haven't spent any of our money promoting either of my opponents. We're just trying to get our message heard. We don't have money pouring in here from out of state, which is, I presume, where that flyer came from. All these out of state organizations are flooding Maine with millions of dollars, and these organizations couldn't give a damn about the people of Maine, about their kids, their future, the future of the state of Maine. They just want a governor with a D or an R after his name, and they're playing games with Maine voters and trying to use Maine voters as a pawn. I'll never do that. Haven't done it, never would.
Okay. So earlier at the forum, you mentioned that you support photos on EBT cards. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I said two things, Chris. I said I don't see a problem with photos on EBT cards. I have a photo on my driver's license. But that's more expensive than what I've proposed doing, which is putting microchips, smart chips, into EBT cards so that you can keep them from being used for the things we don't want them used for, like buying tobacco and buying liquor and buying bail and buying lottery tickets. That's a much smarter and less expensive way to go if you're really concerned about fraud and abuse. And then the other thing I said was that dealing with fraud and abuse is a small part of dealing with the challenge of welfare. The real big challenge is getting people back to work, training them, educating them, weaning them off welfare, and getting them into the workforce.
So I wrote an article about 7 or 8 months ago where LePage came out with, I think he said it was $1.3 million fraudulent transactions on EBT cards. That broke down to about less than 1% of all transactions. So how serious do you think the problem of welfare fraud is?
Let me put it in proportion. First of all, let me say that I think any fraud, any abuse of a system, particularly public assistance, is wrong. And when we find instances of abuse, they ought to be prosecuted, and we ought to fix the system in the ways that I propose to try to contain it, minimize it, okay? But let's keep this in perspective. The governor talks a lot about welfare abuse and fraud, but he doesn't say much about corporate welfare abuse and fraud. This is a guy who just gave away millions of dollars to Kate Street Capital, a company that operated the mill in East Millinocket for a while and then went bankrupt and cost 220 people their jobs. He has no idea where the money went. He has no idea of why it went, how much of it went to Kate Street. Maine taxpayers are going to be writing checks to Louisiana investors now for $16 million over the next 5 years, 16 times what he claims he found in waste, fraud, and abuse in the public assistance system. And what does he say in a debate? He says, yeah, that was a bad deal, and yes, I'd do it again. That's the kind of governor we have. That's not the kind of governor we need.
Right. Okay, so you mentioned USM at the forum, and I've seen your comments on the Metropolitan University in weeks past. Would you
Did I mention? I didn't think I mentioned USM, but okay.
The education system.
I talked about education. I didn't talk about USM.
So where do you stand on the issue of turning USM into a metropolitan university?
If I knew better what that means, I could take a position, I suppose. I don't really fully understand what that means. What I do think is that the Southern Maine and the city of Portland metropolitan area needs to have a good university, a great university, in order to grow. You can't find a great and growing city in America that doesn't have a really good university. And I think the University of Southern Maine ought to be a really good university. It's going to be a transition to get there, because I think that decisions that were made years ago about the University of Southern Maine and about the University of Maine system were the wrong decisions, and plunged both the system and USM into a terrible, terrible situation. And now we've got to work our way out of it. And it's going to be painful. There are going to be people who are going to lose their jobs, and I feel badly for them. I feel badly for students whose majors are going to be changed or terminated. But we have got to make changes in higher education, public higher education in the state of Maine. I've proposed merging the two systems. We're too small a state to maintain two separate systems of public higher education. We've got to get costs under control, and we've got to get rid of the barrier, financial barrier, that keeps Maine kids who graduate from high school from going on to post-secondary education and training.
So there's a lot of folks who are opposing the metropolitan idea, who say that the whole financial crisis is manufactured. Are you versed enough?
I was chair of the Muskie School Board of Visitors for 10 years, and I knew at the time it was happening that we were sliding into financial circumstances that were going to be horribly, horribly difficult to unwind. I saw it. I challenged the president, who later became the chancellor. It went on and on and on, and no one can persuade me that the University of Maine system and the University of Southern Maine is not in a financial bind. It is. The system has a deferred maintenance bill of almost $500 million. And if that's not a financial bind, I don't know what is.
Deferred maintenance for?
Meaning the buildings are falling down.
Right. Okay. All right. So I don't think you read the column, but I write a column for the Portland Sun too. And months ago, I wrote one criticizing you for not doing more to establish ranked choice voting for statewide elections in the last 4 years. Do you think there's more you could have done to get that ball rolling?
It's hard to get that. I propose ranked choice voting or an open primary. My preference would be ranked choice voting. I propose ranked choice voting. I wrote to the governor and I wrote to Mr. Michaud, and I said we've got plenty of time to get this in place to spare Maine people the dilemma that they're going to face in another three-way race. And they both said no, and their parties said no. Now, I don't know what someone in my position could have done beyond what I did to try to get the ball rolling. You know, the real problem with getting any ball rolling in the right direction in Maine right now is that we've got two political parties that have placed their own interests as parties above the interests of the state of Maine. That's the problem. And until we elect another independent as governor, we're not going to get past that problem at all. Now, there is a ranked choice voting initiative. People have initiated a petition for ranked choice voting. It's working its way through the Secretary of State's office right now. I hope and trust it will get approved, and I'll be campaigning for that, win or lose. I think it's really important for the people of the state of Maine, but you've got to lay the blame where it belongs, and that's at the feet of Mr. LePage, Mr. Michaud, and the Republican and Democratic parties. And if people want to solve these problems, if people want to take their democracy back in the state of Maine, they should vote for me on November 4th.
No, for me, it's frustrating. I'm a Green Independent. I ran as a third-party candidate for City Council last year. So I support third-party candidates completely. But you mentioned what's best for the state of Maine. I think if we had ranked choice voting established already, you would have really good shot at winning.
I don't think there's any question about it, but look, it's not going to be in place in this election.
Right.
That's not why I'm for it. I'm for it because I think the state needs it. I think when you have 9 out of the last 10 gubernatorial elections over the last 40 years, multi-candidate fields, sometimes 5, like 2010, sometimes 3, like now, and you don't have ranked choice voting, you're robbing people of a real opportunity to vote for their hopes and their dreams and not their fears. And that's what I want people to be able to do in Maine.
Right.
You gotta throw out another voter.
Okay.
Plus, you've given any number of speeches in the last 40 years about reform or ranked choice voting.
Well, about political reform generally, about getting money out of politics. I mean, that's what I did I was working on that for 2.5 years while I was between campaigns.
Right. All right. I have 2 more questions. So, what do you have to say to people like me who believe that your candidacy serves to skew the results in LePage's favor?
So you're the guy who is a green independent who thinks ranked choice voting is important, and you're what, for a guy who cannot win a 2-way race or a 3-way race, Mr. Michaud? I mean, what do I say to you? I say to you, if you think that I'll be the best governor of the state of Maine, then I want your vote, and I'm asking for your vote. And if you don't think so, then vote for somebody else, but don't vote your fears, because that kind of strategic voting is what put Paul LePage in office the first time.
Great. Okay. Last question. Now, if you had to fill out your ballot and you weren't on the ballot, who would you vote for?
I'd write myself in.